Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking what is honestly one of the most incredible underdog stories in modern business history. I mean, it's a total masterclass in resilience, vision, and just sheer willpower. We're going to see exactly how a massive global empire was built practically out of thin air, and, well, a whole lot of sweat. 1,000 crore rupees. Take a second to really let that sink in. That is roughly what Nike pulls in every single day. Every single day. As the absolute biggest sportswear brand on the planet, they outfit legends like Cristiano Ronaldo and Rafael Nadal. They are, without a doubt, a total titan of industry. But, that brings us to the real mystery we're unraveling today. How exactly does a failed track athlete build this colossal empire? And honestly, the craziest part, how did he do it by literally selling shoes out of the trunk of his car? To really understand how Phil Knight went from a disappointed runner to a billionaire, we've got to go back to the very beginning. Let's jump into Section 1, the crazy idea. The year is 1962. So Phil Knight is 24 years old, and he's just faced a pretty harsh reality. He simply wasn't fast enough to be an elite runner. But he flat out refused to leave the world of sports. While he was wrapping up his MBA, inspiration kind of just struck. He wrote this research paper where he noticed how Japanese cameras had completely disrupted the US market. And he theorized, hey, what if Japanese running shoes could do the exact same thing to giants like Adidas? It was a massive theoretical risk based entirely on a college project. But he decided to go for it anyway. So imagine this. A super nervous, introverted Phil Knight empties his entire savings account and flies all the way to Japan to meet with Onitsuka, the guys who made Tiger brand shoes. When their executives sat down and asked what company he represented, Phil totally panicked. He's frantically picturing his childhood bedroom back home, thinking of these track award ribbons hanging on his wall, and he just blurts out a completely fake name, Blue Ribbon Sports. And no way, amazingly, they bought it. They actually agreed to send him some samples. But what happened next was just an agonizing test of patience. 4 whole months passed, and no shoes. Nothing. To survive, Phil actually had to go get an accounting job. It took almost a full year after that initial meeting in Japan before he finally got a notice from customs. 12 sample shoes had finally arrived. Just 12? Moving right along to Section 2, the perfect partnership. Okay, so Phil had his 12 shoes, right? But he needed an expert to validate them. So he takes him straight to his former college track coach, a guy named Bill Bowerman. Literally the very next day, they shook hands on a 50-50 partnership. And the dynamic between these two was just brilliant. Phil drove the business and the sales, while Bowerman, who was basically this genius coach acting like a mad scientist, he was constantly tearing apart and rebuilding these shoes just to make them a fraction of an ounce lighter and faster. They were the absolute perfect team. So Phil immediately writes back to Japan, secures exclusive Western U.S. distribution rights, and takes out a $1,000 bank loan to buy 300 pairs of shoes. Now, the traditional sports shops, they completely refuse to stock them. So what does Phil do? He literally fills the trunk of his car with these Tiger shoes and just drives to local track meets, pitching and selling them directly to coaches and runners. And guess what? They sold out in just 2 months. Now, they started growing rapidly, but that kind of hypergrowth, it came with a pretty dangerous trap. By their second year, sales had doubled to $16,000, but here's the catch. Because Phil was reinvesting every single penny back into making larger and larger shoe orders, their debt completely skyrocketed. Their cash flow was entirely negative. Eventually, the bank actually cut them off, and Phil had to go take a corporate job at PwC as an accountant, just to keep the business and, well, himself afloat. But while Phil was dealing with the completely chaotic finances, Bowerman was busy at the drafting table. He realized that American runners actually had slightly heavier frames than the Japanese runners the original shoes were designed for. So he combined the best features of a few different models and designed a brand new distance shoe made specifically for the US market. He called it the Cortez, and it was an absolute smash hit. By 1971, sales soared to $1.3 million, and Phil was finally able to quit that accounting job for good. Which brings us to part 3, the birth of Nike in 1971. Now, 1971 really should have been a victory lap for them, but instead, it brought a pretty devastating betrayal. Seeing Blue Ribbon's massive success over in the US, Onitsuka kinda got greedy. They handed Phil a shocking ultimatum: sell a 51% stake of the company back to them, or they would instantly revoke his distribution rights. Bam, just like that. Phil was stunned. But instead of folding, he made the boldest decision of his life. He decided it was time to stop selling someone else's brand. They had to pivot instantly. I mean, their backs were against the wall. Step 1. They paid a graphic design student just $35. Yeah, you heard that right, $35 for a curved, thick checkmark logo that was meant to depict motion. We all know the swoosh, right? Step 2. They needed a name. One of their early employees literally woke up from a dream about the Greek goddess of victory, Nike. Step 3. They quickly secured a new third-party manufacturer, and just like that, on May 30th, 1971, the Nike brand was officially born. The problem was, nobody knew what a Nike was, and giants like Adidas still totally dominated the market. So Phil pioneered what turned out to be a brilliant strategy. He paid Star Trek runner Steve Prefontaine $5,000 a year simply to wear his Nike shoes. They also started exclusively hiring passionate former athletes to be their salespeople. Because these guys had been in the trenches, they genuinely understood the customer's problems, which led to this unparalleled product feedback loop and just incredibly deep brand loyalty. Let's fast forward a bit to Section 4, the Reebok threat in the 1980s. That athlete-first strategy we just talked about, it worked flawlessly. By 1980, Nike was the largest athletics company in the US. But a massive shift in consumer taste was right around the corner. Suddenly, people didn't just care about running performance anymore. They wanted style, they wanted fashion. And a new rival, Reebok, delivered exactly that. They completely overtook Nike in 1986, forcing the company into its first ever major financial losses and some pretty brutal, widespread layoffs. And that brings us to part 5, the Jordan phenomenon. Nike was bleeding out. They desperately needed a magical solution. Well, enter an emerging basketball rookie by the name of Michael Jordan. Phil Knight just had this gut feeling that this kid was going to be an absolute legend. So they signed him and designed a totally revolutionary sneaker. You gotta remember, before this, basketball shoes were basically just plain white and boring. The Air Jordan introduced these incredibly bold colors, merging high athletic performance with high fashion. It was a complete cultural reset. I mean, it literally birthed modern sneaker culture as we know today. The result? Pure fireworks. In just the first year alone, Nike sold $100 million worth of Air Jordans. $100 million. They absolutely obliterated expectations, easily overtaking Reebok once and for all, and completely securing their spot at the top of the mountain, a spot where, frankly, they have stayed ever since. Which leads us nicely into Section 6, the power of execution. This whole remarkable journey brings us to the core lesson of the Nike story, which is the relentless power of execution. Today, Nike sits at a jaw-dropping global valuation of around 12 lakh crore rupees. And to think, this entire empire was built by a guy who took wild but calculated risks, operated literally out of a car trunk, survived crushing, terrifying debt, and repeatedly bet the entire company on his own vision. Phil Knight actually summarized the sheer hustle required to win perfectly in his memoir, Shoe Dog. He wrote, "Let everyone call your idea crazy, just keep going. Don't stop. Don't even think about stopping until you get there." And really, if you think about it, that is the very essence of their famous tagline, "Just do it." It's all about ignoring the noise and just continuously putting one foot in front of the other. Which leaves us with one final, incredibly important thought for today. We've just seen how a college research paper and a totally fake company name turned into a global powerhouse, simply through relentless action. So my question to you is, what crazy idea are you going to execute today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep executing, and